Welcome to Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This is the podcast for leaders and HR decision makers who want to bring out the best in themselves and others. Every other week, I sit down with leading authors, researchers, and practitioners for deep dive conversations about the strategies, insights, and tools that drive personal and organizational success. And in between, I bring you one simple thing, short episodes that deliver practical insights and tips for immediate use. Whether you're here for useful tools or thought-provoking ideas, Leading People is your guide to better leadership. It's hard to believe it, but this is episode 100 of Leading People, a significant milestone for any podcast. And we thought it might be a good moment to do something a little different. So for this episode, I invited someone else to step into the host's chair, with a guest you might not expect to hear on the other side of the microphone. Without further ado, let's have a listen.
Welcome to Leading People with Kate Walker-Miles standing in for Jerry Murray. And my guest this week is Jerry Murray. Jerry, welcome. Welcome to your own podcast. How are you?
I'm good. I'm having a surreal moment being on this side of the equation, and I'm kind of looking forward to being interviewed in my own podcast. So I'm in capable hands, I know that.
Well, I hope so. It's quite meta what we're doing right now. Tell me, what was the idea behind flipping things over for this podcast?
That was a conversation with a very talented young lady who helps me with my marketing called Valeriia. And we were saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? The 100th episode. And the way the sequencing was working was there wouldn't be a formal guest like I have every week. Every second week I have a formal guest, or every second edition. And she just said to me, why don't you become the guest on your own podcast? It'll be something different. And it's maybe people might get to know something else about you that they don't know, or something like that. And then the search came for, who do we know that would have the background and skills and experience in broadcast and other things to maybe facilitate it. And that's how we end up in this situation today.
Everyone else said no, so you came to Kate Walker-Miles.
Please don't. Right, okay, so that's the true story. Yes, we begged, borrowed, and stole, and nobody. No, I think I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So, well, thank you very much for asking me to do this with you, Jerry. I mean, I'm delighted. And what can I just say? What an amazing accomplishment to get to the 100th episode. So lots and lots of water has flown under the podcast bridge since you began. When was that? Tell us about the beginning of the podcast and what made you decide to even attempt such a thing. Loads of people in my work talk about, I'm going to do a podcast, but you actually did it. So how did it come about?
Well, it came about during 2020. I'd had a health scare and had heart attack, and I was recuperating, and that was a pretty unusual time in our lives. And I was kind of thinking, how do you stay relevant in a world that was starting to move very quickly online? Like, I remember when COVID hit, I had planned a couple of webinars on certain things. I was going to launch, I think I was launching a new program, and I'd actually bumped one. I'd bumped this back by 2 weeks, and then COVID came in, and then within a matter of days, everybody was having webinars and promoting something. So I decided not to bother. Mm-hmm. So I felt, how do we get through the noise on this? Now, there's a little backstory to this, and that is that I was once, in the mid-2000s, I was the president of a chapter of an organization called the International Association of Business Communicators. And one of the things when I was president for 2 years, I used to do was I would always be testing out new stuff. And at that time, blogging was starting. So I started testing blogging, and we had this blog called The Captain's Log, kind of strange title, and I started podcasting, and in those days I had a mini disc player, those little square things, and I could stick a microphone into it and record people with a kind of reasonable size type of microphone. But it only lasted, like a lot of podcasts, it only lasted a couple of episodes, and I didn't maintain it. And anyway, the technology wasn't there in those days. You had to have somebody who knew how to activate what was called an RSS feed, and it was hard enough to find somebody who could even spell it, let alone do it. So fast forward, I'm sitting here in the summer of 2020, and I'm thinking, I grew up on talk radio in Ireland, and even when I go home now, and it drove my kids nuts over the years, first thing I want to do is listen to talk radio. I want to find out what's going on in the country, what's on people's minds, people phoning in, guests talking about topical things, and also that turn of expression that Irish people have sometimes, where they can see the world in the kind of humorous or comic way. And I thought that could be really interesting. And the other thing that was happening was I've got an extensive book collection. I like to read. And I got hundreds and hundreds of books. And people would come in here, it's like a library, and some people would say to me, could you recommend a book on this? Or is that book any good? And that. And I thought, you know what? I looked at this book collection one day, and I thought, I actually attended seminars with a whole bunch of those people. I wonder, would they like to tell their backstory? And could we bring something else alive, that particularly for people who are interested in the subject matter and who read books themselves? Wouldn't it be cool if we could meet those people and get to know them in a different kind of a way? So I thought, let me see if I can do that. And I started looking at what was it that I was doing professionally, and we do a lot of work around how to help people perform at their best, whatever that means, right? And to do that, there's a lot of leadership in that, and there's the whole idea of self-leadership as well as leading others. And that's when I came up with this idea of calling it Leading People, with a little bit of a deliberate pun where Jerry Murray speaks to leading people about leading people, how to bring out the best in yourself and others. That's a little bit the backstory. And so I called up a few people, or Zoomed them, or whatever it was in those days, and said, I'm going to do this. Would you be up for it? And a couple of them said, yeah, sure, I'm up for it. And so in the November, December of 2020, I recorded the first 3 episodes, and they dropped. The first ones dropped in January. And we broadcast every 2 weeks for about a year and a half nonstop.
And it's a crowded old space, the podcast market. So
now it is. It wasn't back then.
Ah, of course.
It wasn't. Now it's almost like if you haven't got a podcast, you're naked. It's like
who are you?
You're coming out, like, used to be a business card you gave out. Now you're going, would you like to see listen to my podcast? No, the amount of people who are. And actually, what I find is quite interesting is people contact me to ask for advice on how to do it. And the first thing I say is don't.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, I'm joking in one respect, but I'd say you do realize what you're getting into here. Do you have a team of 10 people? And they're going, no, not really, no. It's like when you and I kind of met through Andrew Palmer at The Economist, and Andrew had producers around him when we were doing the interview with him. Hello, Andrew, if you're listening. And here was me jumping around, being my own producer and that. So I think at the time it wasn't so crowded. Today it's very crowded. I think that makes it challenging for the listeners, as well as challenging for people like me who want to get a certain type of content out there in a, let's say, a relaxed, interesting, maybe even humorous way. So it is a very crowded space today. Now, the thing is, when I looked up the statistics on this at the beginning, most people didn't get past the first 4 or 5.
Most people making podcasts.
Yeah, making podcasts, yeah. They didn't get past the first 4 or 5. Yeah. And they were lucky, to get a bit of an audience. It was really tough work. I think when COVID came, it was an ideal time to do it, because guess what a lot of people did? They went out walking a lot because they needed fresh air. Of course, maybe they had masks on or whatever, but a lot of time you wanted to listen to something. And so I myself was an avid podcast listener by then. And I would have certain podcasts. I'd say, well, that's a 50-minute podcast. That's a great walk. That's going to get me around along the river here beside us and back again and stuff. So that's a little bit the background to it. And at the same time, I feel quite strongly that what we talk about, what we cover, is important, and I'm so grateful and so lucky to have had some of the most amazing people as guests. It's like unbelievably, like it's just such a fascinating thing to talk to some of these people. You watch them on YouTube or TED or whatever, and they've got 15 million views, and then they're standing in front of you on the camera here, and you're having a really interesting conversation with them, and they're, it's a great learning opportunity.
It's such a privileged position, isn't it? To be able to follow your nose and your curiosity about who you want to talk to, but with the listener in mind, and then be able to actually then ask all those questions that you want to ask. So how do you go about deciding and choosing who you're going to approach? And how do you go about getting them to come on?
Right. Well, as I said earlier, part of it came from looking at the bookshelf, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think it's a combination of things. It's like maybe I'll read a Harvard Business Review article, and then I realize there's a lot of the time in the articles there's new books coming out. I think, oh, that could be quite cool. Or somebody on LinkedIn posts. That's another way. You just see it. Another one is some guests recommend other guests. They say, I remember Stefan Meyer at Columbia Business School. He said, you need to interview Adam Galinsky. He's got a great book out. And so that was one way. And there are a lot of PR agencies who pitch. They're working for either the publishers or maybe the authors. And I get pitched 4 or 5 people every day from the US. And some of the topics aren't that interesting for my audience. Maybe a few aren't that interesting for me. Also, I have to be interested in myself. Also, the time zone aspect can be a little bit of a challenge. Just getting the scheduling. And then to answer your question about how do I get them to come on the program, I just ask them. And literally I reach out to authors and I say, I've read your book, or I've just bought your book. I saw your talk on whatever. This topic could fit really nicely into the podcast. Here's the kind of theme. Here's a link to some episodes. And I do have a guest briefing. I have a professional looking, you've seen it, a professional looking guest briefing as reassurance that I know what I'm doing. And I say, if this is something that could interest you, and often I connect with them on LinkedIn first. And if it's something that interests you, let's take it to email and I'll send you the background information. And I've got now some new guests lined up for after this one airs. And they're quite keen to come and be on the program. So I've been very lucky. Now, a few have taken a little bit of persistence. But what I find is sometimes I've asked an author who I've got maybe 2 or 3 books from, but there's nothing new happening. And then all of a sudden you see something new happening, like a new book is coming out, and there's no hesitation.
Funny that.
Well, I mean, it's natural because, of course, they want people. They want to get their message out.
Yeah, let's shift some books. And to tell me then, you've done 100 episodes, and this is a bit like, asking me which one of my kids I like best. But of those 100 episodes, which one really, I guess I'm curious about, which one really stands out for you as the one that the process of making it was joyful? And which one has registered best with your audience? Which one is their favourite?
Well, I would like to answer that by maybe citing a couple of episodes. Like every episode, honestly, it would be unfair to the guests to single out specific episodes as favourites or better. There have been a few episodes. I've interviewed a couple of people who went through tragedy. And one of them... Your
neighbour, right? Amazing.
My neighbour, Julie, up the street, whose husband, who was a fantastic guy, fell through a block of ice in Greenland. He was a polar explorer. And I had met him just 2 days before he left. And I remember at the time saying, I should have asked him to come. I wanted to get him on the podcast for a while, and I forgot to ask him. I said, sure, I'll get him when he's back. And I sent an email this one Tuesday morning in June, 4 years ago, I think it was. And I said, and Julie often dealt with these things. And I said, Julie, Dixie should be back very soon. I'd really love to get him on the podcast. I heard nothing. And then a friend of ours sent a message saying, have you heard the news on the radio?
Wow.
So it was like a poignant moment. That was an interesting one to go through, because we also wanted to highlight how Judy was making her own way in life. Now, she's been on twice, but that episode was one of the most listened to episodes at the time. I also had a wonderful young woman as a client. She was working in admin roles here in Belgium, and she wanted to be a full-time fitness instructor. She was a champion swimmer, and she was doing fitness classes at one of the top gyms in Brussels, various types of stretch classes and stuff like that. And she hired a personal trainer to get her really she was super fit, but to get her super, super fit, where she had about 6-7% body fat. So that anybody who knows about these things, that is basically all muscle. Yeah. And she hired me to help her quit her job and be able to have the courage to start off as a business. And she succeeded. It was a wonderful moment when she invited me to the club just to have a coffee or a tea and talk about this. And then a couple of months later, she was standing beside one of the suicide bombers at Brussels airport. And her life was shattered and her body was shattered. She survived it. And she came on the program. And I even get a bit emotional about it today. That was also a very special moment. Today, she's reinvented herself. She's doing a lot of work in the disability space because she's quite disabled these days as a result of that. One thing that we talked about a lot on that program was resilience, not from a theoretical point of view, but what's it like to live in a world where everything that she stood for had been devastated in that one event. And yet the strength of mind, I suppose it was the strength of mind that made her a champion swimmer. It kicked in for her, and she decided that she wasn't going to let this define her life, other than the fact that it had affected her physically. But she decided that she was going to do the best with it. So those are two. Then there was a at the beginning. I thought I needed to be very formal, and just follow my little script. And then I had a chat with a guy that I did a lot of training with. He was a trainer of mine. This was, in a way, a kind of a mentor. And in the training that I was doing with him and several others in that space, humor was a big part of it, and actually, because of my studies in neuroscience, there's so much benefit to using humor in a learning context. And we got on the program and we got on a roll, and we had lots of banter and a lot of humor, that kind of situational stuff, just the two of us. And we almost lost track of time. We went over the hour, and I said, Jesus, I think we're going to have to end this now. But people started writing into me afterwards saying they really enjoyed it, because they said it was like standing at the bar, listening to a couple of blokes having a real Barney, and just maybe even feeling like you could chip in and just enjoying, as we say in Ireland, enjoying the crack, And so that then helped me realize that appropriate humor is okay. I don't like to have politics or controversial subjects like that, because people aren't entitled to political views. And that, I think it's a very complicated, complex part of our lives, politics. So I ask people not to do anything with that. But for the rest, I say appropriate humor. Why not? Because if you're out there listening to this, why not have a bit of a laugh when you might look kind of strange, go down the street laughing your head off if your neighbours are looking at you, but then when they see the headset in, they're going to go, it must be Jerry Murray's podcast again.
I mean, when I guested, I had an absolute whale of a time. I think we went well over the hour, didn't we? And I remember feeling exactly that. I forgot that we were doing a podcast. I felt that we were two people who love understanding people's behaviour and the brain, having a proper good chin wag and a bit of a laugh. Yeah. And I wonder how much of that do you think comes from, and I think we had talked about it a little bit when we were together, about your music and about the improvisation, your skills that you need as a musician. I'm curious about whether you're aware of those skills coming in and supporting you in this process.
Yes. Actually, one of the things I'm going to answer that question by segueing through a slight experience. When I was at school, I was in the class. Now, maybe this was not unique, but I thought it was at the time. I was in the class of, I think it was 26 of us in the class. There must have been 25 comedians. There were people, you weren't safe at all, you know. Everybody was, we would get around. It would just be one story after another. And so I guess it was a sort of natural way of being. And then my early days as a young guy playing music, what would used to happen is we'd go to the parish hall, you know, and there'd be a concert and there'd be a couple of microphones on stage and musicians would come out and play for 10, 15 minutes and maybe sing and nobody would say anything. The MC would introduce them, they'd come out and they'd play and then the audience would clap and then they'd play again, the audience would clap.
So polite.
And I started going to folk clubs, you know, as a young fella. And part of it was, yes, I was watching these. Like, you used to get a lot of singer-songwriter guys, you know, because folk clubs weren't big and they couldn't afford big bands and that. So you'd go and you'd watch these guys. And like the classic thing that would happen is they break string, you know. So what do? Did they go off and say, I'll see you later? Or whatever? No, these guys were so good, they'd pull the string out of, let's just say, hold on a second, they'd go and pull out a string, and they'd thread the string, and they'd start the banter, you know. And I was as fascinated by the banter and how that helped keep the audiences engaged, you know. And you had these wonderful, I once did I used to play a bit with a guy here, and we used to do some stuff in Brussels, and this particular bar had a lot of wood paneling and a lot of wooden stools in it. And so often starting off the evening, there'd be nobody there, maybe 2 or 3 people, and no one would introduce the evening by saying, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the furniture exhibition, because there was more furniture than people. And you'd have all these little things. And so I was like, I'd be writing these things on my arm even. So I thought this made the evening very special. So when we started playing professionally in the 90s, everything had moved on and bands were super well, you know, this idea the Irish bands had a reputation for drinking and all that was all gone, you know. Nobody was turning up drunk, or they weren't bringing alcohol on stage or anything. They were doing super professional job and presenting. And we found as a band that virtually all of us had our own little sense of presence and uniqueness and a little bit of humor. And so depending on the audience, you know, we all shared the presenting. And once you'd get a little thing going between 2 or 3 of the band members, and it worked, it'd be like a comedian stacking up their routine. And we found that this helped an awful lot, you know, in terms of people just loved it. They'd come up and talk to you afterwards. And I remember one time, one of the lads, we were introducing this medley of tunes, and Michael had the bright idea. He says, you know, we like to write music for our children in this band, and I've written one for my daughter. I have one daughter, and Kieran here has 3 sons, and he's written one for his 3 sons, a tune each, and Jerry here has written 44 tunes, you see. and the audience fell off their seats, right? And then I couldn't resist. I said, and I'm still composing. So this became a routine a lot of the time. But you know, people used to come up to me and say, do you really have 44 children? After the concert, or how many do you have? You know, like, so these little routines would emerge. And I remember we went out one night on stage to do the second half of a concert way up in the north of the Netherlands. And the first part had a lot of band, and people started, you know, doing a little bit of, you know, jeering us a bit and, you know, quipping as we came back out. And we actually had an interaction with them. Yeah, they were heckling. Hecklers, yes. But you see, people like Billy Connolly teaches you how to deal with hecklers, and you listen to his work and people like. But anyway, we ended up having a conversation with the audience for 10 minutes. And so it was funny all the time. So I think that humor, life would be very sad if we couldn't laugh at things. And also life would be very sad. And I feel sad for people in cultures where music is not allowed in some cultures, where it's been banned. There's something about it that makes, just moves us. And, if you go out to a concert, I know a lot of stars can come out on stage and they have the show and, maybe they don't always talk that much. But people don't necessarily go just for the music. They go for a good night out. And you want to go home feeling, I enjoyed myself. You might not remember what it was that you enjoyed specifically, but you want to go home and think, I enjoyed that. So that's always been an anchor point for me. So.
It's a bit like the people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did. People always remember how you made them feel.
That's right.
A bit of Maya Angelou there.
Yes.
There's so much in what you've just said, though. I mean, we're remembering that this title of this series is Leading People, about really brilliant leadership, actually. So for me, that's showing up and really being yourself on stage as you evolved as a band and being able to have that banter and just chat with the audience is creating the experience for them to get way more from the experience because you're being at ease, you're creating ease in them and you're letting them get to know you. And I really like the other one. You were talking about the guy restringing and chatting to the audience as he's restringing and setting out for the audience. Look, things go wrong. It's fine. I'm not flustered by this. This is what we do. We fail. We start again. It's all good. So that made me think, as you were saying all that, you mentioned Valeriia. So you have got a team. I don't know if there's perhaps even a bigger team than just Valeriia. I'm not sure what's behind the scenes for you. But what kind of leader are you? You've spoken to all these people with all their theories about leadership, and you've come with years of your own experience and research. But how would Valeriia describe you as a leader?
Oh, we'll have to call her up. Actually, I'm going to answer that by rewinding to the first proper kind of serious management job I had. They put me in charge in London as a young guy, in charge of must have been 10 people. And I was operating from the model that I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell these people what to do because I'm the boss.
I'm supposed to know.
Yes. I had worked on some building sites where the foreman tells everybody what to do. So I thought that must be what bosses do and managers do. They tell people what to do. And I will admit this now because it's so long ago that I got it so horribly wrong. It was unbelievable how badly I got it wrong, to the point where I think the first time I decided to ask them to all do something different, they kind of basically almost threatened to leave, go on strike or something. And I thought, here's the one thing that I kind of has helped me over the years is if you do something and it doesn't produce the result that you were hoping it was going to produce, you can either hammer on with it again and think, well, I'll just keep going at it. You can give up, or you can go get curious and go, I wonder what it is I missed or I might need to learn. So I remember, now people out there who can remember this book will probably laugh. And I actually know one of the people who helped develop this methodology. The 1 Minute Manager, believe it or not, was the book that totally reorientated me to going, actually it's about them, the people who work for you, not about you. It's really about the people who work for you. So what I've tended to do is, it's funny, somebody asked me about doing some team building the other day, and I was putting together a little description of, I haven't done it in a while, but I used to take on these workshops in the Netherlands, weekend workshops. A lot of adults would come who like to play Irish music. And the whole goal of it was we'd come on a Friday evening. It was on an island, so you had to get a ferry across. And by Sunday afternoon, I would be working with a group of musicians, maybe 10 to 15 musicians. And on Sunday afternoon, they would give a performance, totally from what we did over the weekend. And what I learned from doing that, and I think this has also helped me in any sort of leadership role, is I will turn up on that Friday evening and I actually don't know what I'm going to get. Right, you're an improviser, you know the setting, right? I don't know what I'm going to get. I have a few ideas about I'll have researched some music, and I'll think, well, we could put that together with that. This one will change the mood, it'll change the pace, etc. But I have no idea how it's going to turn out. So I throw some ideas into the room and work with where people are, right? Not try to make them more than they are. Work with where they're at. And that's Friday's a bit of an experimental evening. By Saturday afternoon or late Saturday morning, my experience has been people go away at the coffee breaks and they come back in, they huddle together and they come back in and say, hey, we've got an idea how we could alter the arrangement on this, right? And we'll say, let's find out how that works, explain it to the others. And often it works. And this particular weekend, I don't actually play any music with these people. Now, I'm the guy in the room who's supposed to be the teacher, and I'm supposed to be the kind of high-end musician. But with them, I don't play hardly any music. I may occasionally show them something, but I don't play along with them. And I've never seen so much joy in people's faces on the Sunday afternoon when they perform what they have created together. And so I have always thought that, you know this thing, if you think you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? It's okay to know stuff, but if you're trying to do something in an organization or you're trying to build something, you need to give the people the chance to do it. Yes, you might orchestrate it and you might direct it and you might come in and support it and intervene and ask people to change things. But that's my analogy for what it's like. So with take Valeriia, for example, who's been helping me out now. She's based in Odessa, so she has her own challenges. I'm just so pleased sometimes she's on the other end of the screen. Given a lot of time this last while, no electricity, she's having to improvise around that. But one of the things when I asked her to come and work with me, she'd been working in an agency and then she'd left the agency. And I asked her to help define what she was going to do. She kind of knew what we were trying to do in the marketing side, but I asked her to come back to me and define what were the things that she thought we should be doing and what were the things she enjoyed most doing, right? So when I ask her to do new stuff, I always check in with her that either first that she knows how to do it, right? Because she might need my help or input, or maybe neither of us know how to do it. We have to find a way. That she actually finds it interesting and motivating to do it, right, in the first place. And so we're also always focused on the outcome, So we launched this year what we call these live talent labs. And there was a lot of work we need to get in the first one done. And what kept us going was we're going to feel great when that first one finishes and we can go, we got it, right? And then go into the second and third ones, and that has been easier because now we know what the outcome's going to be like, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very long answer, I think, but I feel that it's about listening, it's about asking questions, it's about helping. I always like this metaphor for questions, which is a good question helps you shine a light where the other person may not have thought of looking. It's like a spotlight. And I find that is really, if you want to lead people, because that light might guide them where you want them to go anyway. So it's helping the leadership journey. Yeah.
It's absolutely. I mean, I couldn't concur more. But it's really interesting, though, to hear you say that you found your style out of the burning embers of failure, in a way. And that's exactly the same story that I shared with you when I talked about I got it completely wrong when I was first put in a leadership position. I'm curious whether that's a theme that you've heard come up quite a few times with your guests. And I'm also curious about, how do you feel now? I heard you talk on a podcast recently about it being such a crowded space in terms of leadership approaches and leadership gurus and experts and so on. But the hope from that maybe is that people at least have opportunity to, if they don't have a great role model that they've grown up with as a leader, there's opportunity now to find for yourself. I'm wondering, how do you feel we're going in the world in terms of leadership?
Okay, let me quickly answer the first part of that question. There is an episode with a guy called Andy Lancaster, who was head of learning at the CIPD, it's a very prominent institute in the UK for HR people and that. And the episode is about we have to encourage people to fail so they can learn better. And I've got a couple of people who've come on and talked about that. Now, the leadership thing, where is it all going? Actually, there's an interesting challenge coming along for leaders, and that is, how are they going to co-lead people and technology at the same time? When we look at things like agentic AI and that, and how are they going to stay human throughout that process? And we have to be careful. I've done a few episodes on the AI thing. I'm fascinated by all technologies over the years. I'm also wary of them. I think we have to be careful to ensure that we have we are overseeing the technology, and we never let the technologies oversee us to any major extent, right? And I know people who've worked in organizations where technology drives their day, and if they need to go for even a toilet break, if they go for longer than 10 minutes, they have to explain it and that, because the technology recording it. I don't think that's, I find that discomforting a little bit. I think that getting back to the leadership question, a lot of it comes down to working with the energy of the other person. And that means you have to have a certain antennae for sensing where somebody else is, And we have lots of reference points for this in sport, in entertainment, etc. We can give of our best if we feel good about things, and then if we have the skill on top of that to produce results. So I would like to think that leaders will become more human. Now, why do I say more human? Because there's so much pressure today, partly created just by the volume of information and technologies that come at us. But I would like to think that they see their role as drawing out the best in the people around them. And, that they see themselves as facilitating that as much as telling people what to do. Yes, some people, at times we all need directions. Like if you get lost in London, you're not going to walk up to somebody and have them say, well, let me coach you through where would you like to go? Or the classic Irish one was the fella in County Kerry, the tourist, he stops at a local farmer and he says, I'm lost, I want to get to Dublin. And the farmer says, if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. So if you want directions and you're going to try and catch a train and you're trying to get to Victoria Station, you don't want some guy coaching you on the corner. Just tell me. So there's this idea of there's this ability to see things and experience things, the empathy stuff. But there's also the other thing that sometimes is missing is the ability to read context. Yeah. And it's about understanding context and being adaptable enough. I have a TED talk on adaptive capacity, which is how much capacity do I have to adapt to, it's more the interpersonal stuff, but how much capacity do I have to adapt to situations? And if I'm struggling at times, what do I need to learn about myself to be able to adapt to more and more situations I find myself in? Or perhaps the situations I need to adapt to are not situations I want to be in. Maybe I need to change something and not put myself in situations where, it's not helping me.
And that's triggered a thought around, I'm of a certain generation, Jerry, and I think we may not be far apart in that respect. And people that we're now leading have grown up in a very, very different generation. And we both live in fairly multicultural areas. So we can't make assumptions that people are operating from the same schemas as us. They haven't grown up with the same guidelines as us, even necessarily. So that piece around adaptability and that adaptive capacity, I think, is becoming even more important than potentially ever before. Or maybe it was forever thus. Who knows?
Well, here's my take on it. As you might expect, I might have a take on it. So here's my take on it. I think people of a certain generation, as you call them, there's something that there's an exchange opportunity here. Let's just take Valeriia, for example. I mean, she's super tech bright. I mean, I'm also quite tuned into tech. But, I'm not going to try and tell her how the technology works. I'm going to ask her to teach me how the technology works. What I'm noticing, maybe I hope I'm noticing this in a positive way, is that she has something to learn from. Maybe it's experience, maybe it's wisdom on my part, and I am constantly asking her how much she's learning, because for me, now a little bit that was my model of the world, but at the time, but I think it's always useful if she says, I'm learning loads, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm getting exposed to some people. Like these live labs, we've had some amazing guests on so far, and she's saying, these people are just amazing, and she's saying, I've been on webinars where it's just boring and you're just listening to somebody preaching at you. And I've designed it in such a way that it's a little bit part podcast, part workshop, and part webinar. So we start off with a little bit of interviewing, and then we really discourage the guests from putting up too many slides, and we keep it as human as we can. And draw things out that way. So it's just little remarks like that. And I think that there's our generation, all generations have if they think of it as an exchange, that we all bring something to the party, then perhaps that will ease. If there are tensions out there, that will help ease those tensions.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sense of living really in curiosity, isn't it? I don't have to be the expert. I have to show up and then be curious. And I have to be able to improvise. And so, Jerry, I know we need to start thinking about bringing this glorious episode to a close. But if I may, as one improviser to another, would like to put you right on the spot. Looking in panic.
I'm just not looking for the spot.
Oh, touche.
You said it was improvising.
Yeah, touche. So, that dinner party game where you have to design your dream dinner party, dead or alive guests.
Oh.
What about your dream podcast, dead or alive guests? Who would it be?
Oh. Do you know, I'm going to do what an improviser probably would do. I'm going to take the first image that came into my head.
Great. Build on it.
And that would be the Leading People Summit, where they're all there.
Are we doing a Leading People Summit?
Well, I've had this dream for a while. When I started this off, I'm a bit like that. I'll always have the big dream at the end of it. So when people would say to me, why are you doing the podcast? I said, one day we'll do the Leading People Summit.
Ooh.
And we'll bring as many of these people back as we can. So, I mean, I would see panels, and I would see others coming out just to be there and hang out. But also think of some of the wonderful synergies that would come out of some of these brilliant minds bouncing off each other. They might not always agree with each other, but think of some of the sparks that would fly. And this is one of the things from the music world that is probably an interesting analogy. And it happens a lot in jazz music. It also happens a lot in Irish music, is you rarely play the same piece the same way twice. And if you play with some musicians, you'll never produce maybe the same, unless it's a performance. But you know the way Irish people like to do this in the corner of a pub? Those are totally unique experiences. They never get repeated. Even if you sat down and tried to reproduce it, you probably wouldn't. So there's something about that being in the moment. But that's the first image came into my head. And I always trust that, unless it's a very obscene or rude thing, I always trust that probably is the right answer to your question.
Yeah. I love it. And I think what a brilliant fantasy to have, because this actually could be a reality. So 100 episodes, hopefully 100 more to come. How do you imagine it evolving from here?
That's a very useful question, because I am following some people that help podcasters. There's one guy in particular I follow quite a lot, and he's I think I'm special at 100. He's made 300 episodes of his, but he's been doing it since 2015, and he comes from broadcast, And so I've listened to a lot of his advice, and I feel that I probably have implemented well over 80% of it. It seems that I've got a lot of things that work. I'm kind of curious to have a conversation with this guy, just to find out what I could do to make this even better. I have put questions out to listeners, and they've given me ideas and suggestions, and I actually wish I'd never followed them. Sorry about that out there. Because some people said, "Oh, they're too long," or you make too many, or you should take a break, or this. And every time I've followed that kind of thing, it didn't feel right, and I've done it, and then I go, or they say, "Why don't you listen to that guy's podcast?" Yeah, but you listen to that guy's podcast, and he has a totally different type. First of all, he's a different audience, and maybe he's got a different format, and there's a different flavor. He's got a different style. Maybe it's somebody with strong opinions, but people just like it because it's strong opinions. So yeah, there's some of that. No, I'm going to. This will go out now, and there's some new guests lined up. I'm going to take the early part of 2026 to just step back a bit and think about the podcast. So the podcast started off as an interview format, and then to align with a lot of the some of the training materials and courses that we had, I did introduce then a One Simple Thing episode, and that was actually inspired by the late Dr. Michael Mosley, who I was a huge fan of for his work on his on nutrition and healthy lifestyle and that. And tragically, he died nearly a year ago or more.
I think it'd be 2 years this summer, I think.
Yeah. And but he had started something called Just One Thing or that. And I thought, actually, this is great. Now, his was a 15-minute episode. People test out things. But I thought, well, I have a library of so many little tools that I could share with people. And one of the things, I built a personal development group in Brussels over a 10-year period. It kind of, unfortunately, ended when COVID came. But what we did was we would, it grew to about 1,000 people. For a city, that's not bad, and it was all done in English. So you remember Belgium is a multilingual country. So it was attracting an international audience. And what I would do is every month I would run a seminar for an hour or two and charge a very small amount of money just to cover some overhead costs. And people would say to me, "Why do you do that?" And I would say, because I can practice. And I can practice with a different audience every time, And so I would take a little sliver of something. It could be a listening skill or it could be whatever. And I would just go out and teach that in the evening. So that was part of the motivation for the One Simple Thing. Could I create some really useful insights or tips for people, particularly younger managers? Because I go back to my story of screwing it up, and there's so much research out there that shows that young managers are not getting onboarded very well. People are put into these jobs because they deliver results, but they don't necessarily have those skills for actually leading people, I think, pardon the expression. So I started putting those out, and those are slightly different style. If you've listened to them, I highly produce them. I put sound effects in and stuff like that. It's also to give the audience, supposing you want a quick fix, and there you have it on there. It's also seeing whether I can attract a low attention span group of people from some generations. I don't know. I've seen older people, people who've retired. I've never seen people doom scroll as much through Instagram as some of the people who are, because they have nothing else to do and they're just going up and down. So I'm not saying attention spans are unique to any generation. I thought maybe the 5-minute episodes would help that. So I'm doing both of those, and I might go out and see if I can get some extra insights and tips about what I could do to make it more interesting or better for the listener.
Well, we'll miss you when you take your little break. But I hope it's really, really fruitful, Jerry, because as you know, I am an avid listener, and I'm sure that there's loads of people like me around the world, as I take it from your listening base.
That's right, yeah. I'm not going to stop that, by the way. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to make some alterations, like when you go to the shop and buy a pair of trousers and they don't quite fit, you're going to alter them. You're not going to just say, "I'm not wearing any trousers for the next 3 weeks."
Go naked.
No, I'm going to still wear trousers. So my aim is to continue, because I actually have had people reaching out to me telling me that they've got new books coming out, and I've said, "Oh, sure, well, let's keep going." But I am going to look at the format and the approach a little bit.
I see.
I'm going to get some professional let's say, some professional advice, I hope, around a few things, just to see, am I missing something, or is there something else I could be doing, or maybe it works quite well and I should just continue as I am. But so I'm going to take a little rain check, but I'm not going to stop, because the last time I stopped, it wasn't a good idea. I did take a break. I thought I was breaking for a month, and I ended up breaking for about 4 months. And there was a lost momentum. There was a lot of flow I lost and everything else at that time. So I'm going to keep going. I think it's worth it. I think the next 100 episodes will be, I'm sure there's going to be some amazingly interesting people, because people are starting to write books all the time. So the next new authors out there will pop up, and I'll invite them on the show.
Well, I'll be back, Jerry, when you've written your book, and I'll be interviewing you again. But until then, we probably need to say goodbye, Jerry. But thank you for putting your trust in me to do this episode with you. It's been very strange being on the other side of the stool, but thank you, and absolute best of luck. May there be many, many 100 more episodes.
Thank you for stepping in and being me for an hour.
I loved it.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thank you for being part of the Leading People journey since that first episode way back in January 2021. I really appreciate your support over the years, and there's much more to come on Leading People. And remember, before our next full episode, there's another One Simple Thing episode waiting for you. A quick and actionable tip to help you lead and live better. Keep an eye out for it wherever you listen to this podcast. Until next time.